Another Tuesday, another Compliance Tuesday. Welcome again. My name is Casper de Horst. I'm one of the founders of Project IP. And today, me and you, are going to have a look at the EU regulation on deforestation-free products. That is a long name for something that everybody calls EUDR. It's quite interesting update today because last week there was a discussion and a vote in the parliament in Brussels. So let's bring you up to speed on what it is about and what is the current status. We'll be with, I expect around 200 people, so still people are signing in. Give them a few minutes. You know, it's 60, I expect a little bit more. So for those who don't know Project IP, we are software as a service, SaaS solution with knowledge. We'll say CAS, nice Dutch word, cheese. Knowledge as a service. We look at what is relevant for compliance on products and related for the supply chain in the EU and the various EU member states and the UK and Norway and Switzerland, the EEA countries that follow the EU. And we translate that in things that you actually can do, should do, or have to do. So it's nice to know that you need to do something. It's even better to know what you need to do. It's quite a challenge for you to do things. It's not always easy. We try to make your life a little bit more easier on those aspects. You might have seen the logo of Project IP on the helmet and package of Kimberly Bos, Dutch skeleton athlete, Olympic medalist, and the season started this weekend again. If you want to follow her and the schedule, have a look at the English and Dutch website of Kimberly Bos. And some of the things that are relevant for an athlete are relevant for you in your daily life and as business as well. Focus on the things that you actually can influence. Many times in meetings with customers, they speak of legislation / Brussels as a problem, but if you cannot solve that problem, you need to deal with the result. So actually, it's I also wouldn't call it a challenge, but definitely don't call it a problem. It's a reality what happens in legislation. So my name Casper. Have a look at projectip.com if you want to learn more about us and connect on LinkedIn. So the Deforestation-Free Products Regulation 2023/1115 is going to replace the 995/2010, the timber regulation. So that already by itself implies that it's not entirely new. That's correct. Let me take you a little bit along the storyline of what it's actually about. And this might be helpful for you to understand what it's about, but also maybe to explain to some of your peers in the company and maybe even suppliers. We've had the timber regulation for the best part of, I think, a decade, actually. It has quite a limited scope of products. It's AS, HS based, so that means that people actually are focusing on products that are based on an import code, so it's need to be on a HS code. Quite a limited scope, always about wood, and you need to have an opinion about the sustainability of where the wood is coming from. That can still be quite a long supply chain, but it's quite, well, I'd say not so complex as EU deforestation-free products. So it's about a tree, and if the tree is being cut, was it cut in a sustainable forest? Anyways, there's a new tree being placed for that tree. If you have secured that information, then you are able to import this number of products. Limited scope, been there for a decade. I don't think it was really too difficult to deal with it. And if you haven't been able to do due diligence, you should not import. So it's quite, well, I wouldn't say voluntarily, but it's not so stringent as what you would expect now. So we're coming from EUDR for the last decade. Now we are moving to EU deforestation-free products from timber regulation. First of all, if you look at the scope of wooden products, I think it's actually has all the HS codes of all the products that are involved in wood. It's too much even to show in this presentation. I will share the legislation with you in the slide deck, which become available after the presentation. And in the annex of the EUDR, there's an overview of all the HS codes that indicate which products are covered by this legislation. Yeah? So it's HS driven. But it's not just about the tree. So it's also about the way the tree is being cut and the wood is being processed. You know, you could have a sustainable forest and you have kids cutting trees, or you could have a sustainable forest, but actually there's a lot of oil spill during the processing of the wood in that forest. Or you could have a sustainable forest, but the working conditions in the wood mill that is processing the wood is actually not up to par. So the EUDR is not just looking at the forestry, it's looking at all the aspects, I would say from tree to product. And that is definitely a challenge. So you need to look at all the aspects, and you must declare that you have done so before import. And that is a significant change of process compared to the relatively voluntarily work on the EU timber regulation. I wouldn't say voluntarily in the sense it's of course legislation, but here the declaration is more stringent, and you will get a number back from the declaration that you need to have on your import documents. So no declaration is no number is no import. So I would say that is less voluntarily as that it was before, right? So let's go back to timber regulation, a 3 limited scope of wooden products based on a limited set of HS codes, some due diligence needed. If that was done, you could import the product. There was nobody actually additional checks. Sure, customs could do a random check and ask you for how do you do the due diligence, but it's not so severe regime as what we have now. So yes, that is the rule, but who's checking this randomly? EUDR 3, everything that is there in the supply chain with cutting the tree as well, processing the wood, transport, who is involved, and is that all on par as well? No kids involved in the wood mill, no oil spill during the cutting in the forest, no rivers diverted to actually, build roads, etc. Just not the tree only. If everything is okay, you must declare, then you will get a number. That number need to be on import documents. Definitely a different process. One aspect not okay, you cannot declare, you cannot import. That also means that there's many more variables in that process, and anything changing in that process, any new partner in that process could actually mean that you need to do a lot of due diligence work again. Yeah, I say you, but it's like domino stones. You buy from one entity, they buy from other entities, they buy from other entities, they get other entities involved. It's a daisy chain. And everyone in the chain needs to have a responsibility to look at the previous entity in the chain. Otherwise, this is impossible to deal with. The other question is, do you want to look into supply chain partners every time again? Or do you want them to have a certified system that actually says everything that I process through my company actually complies with all these aspects? See here my certificate, and you have others, third parties, audit these certificates. I think that's the way forward. But the EUDR is not just for those that have wooden products. It actually involves many other products related to illegal harvesting, palm oil, meat, coffee, leather, soy, cacao, natural rubber, meat as well. Yeah, sure. If you cut a forest illegally and then you plant soy on it to make money, and with that soy you feed cattle, and from that cattle you actually have leather and meat, then this is an illegal supply chain. Yeah? So it's the duck is the rubber duck in this case, stands for rubber. So it's not just food. And that also explains, if you look at the noise that is being made by the industry in Brussels against this legislation or against aspects of legislation, actually it's not so much from the non-food, it's from the food area. Yeah, because if your business is just coffee or cocoa or soy, then this is a tremendous impact. Yeah. They also need to look at this complete chain and make declarations. And I think in food, the level of declarations is much higher, many more orders on food than are on non-food. So you're not alone in this world. The pressure on the supply chain is not just coming from those that buy wood or wooden products, which makes probably life a little bit easier, because don't forget there's many people in this industry further down the supply chain, and their complete livelihood depends on selling coffee or selling wood or selling palm oil. Yeah. So in text, it is a shift in focus. It's a broader scope. There are more criteria, and actually there's no room for error, because you must declare, and after you declare, there's a portal at the EU, you need to declare there, and then you get a number back. So it's also batch based, not SKU based. So this is definitely definitely a different process and definitely a different effort. And what's Product IP doing in this? Well, we are not a lab, we are not an audit organization, we are definitely not going to certify forests. We will help you to ask the right questions to the next one in the supply chain. Namely, do you have done your duty? And that needs to be certified documents, etc., that you need to organize. And we will probably help you with collecting relevant data that you need to put on the declaration of conformity. But this will be a relatively single file process, and it cannot even be automated at this moment. It's actually a lot of work involved. Yeah? Companies that are dealing with EUDR in a continuous way, because they just do coffee or just do cacao or palm oil. The word just is not as, it's a minor effort. It's only focus, mostly this product. They probably will have organized their processes already a long time ago. So what aspects do you need to look for? What kind of data layer you need to have on top of the fact that the product still need to be a compliant product? Well, it's actually always about who is involved. If you looked into the quality of bill of materials in files in Product IP, it's quite poor in terms of who is the second tier. And here it's not only second tier, it's also third tier and fourth tier. Who is supplying which parts to me? And sometimes that group can be bigger. You can have alternative suppliers. But do you know these suppliers, or does your first tier actually control their first tier, their vendors, your second tier? I think we really need to start looking into the daisy chain of supply chain. You cannot just accept from your supplier that they don't tell you who is the next one in the supply chain and what their effort is to ensure that they do the same things that you want the first tier to do. So you post restrictions on your supplier, and they should post similar restrictions on their vendors. Who should audit their vendors? They should audit their vendors. This is actually a normal business practice. So in the end, if you look at the last part or the original part of supply chain, it would be, where was the tree? Or where was the cattle? Yeah, or where was the coffee coming from? This is geolocation data. It's geolocation data is not new. If you drive your car, you have a map and you look on Google Maps and you see businesses appear everywhere. These are coordinates, geolocation data. If you buy a plot of land to build a house, or you buy a house with land, then there will be geolocation data. Which part of the property, where's the corners of the property, belongs to you now that you have paid for it. People say nobody has this, but that's not true. If you want to have a permit to cut trees in a sustainable way, that permit always will indicate locations. If there's no data, you need to wonder, is there a permit? If there is a permit, there's data. And what about things like MDF? Yeah, this is the same. The MDF is often waste wood coming from wood processing industry. If they cannot guarantee that all the wood they processes comes from certain areas where permits are in place of sustainable forestry, then how can you ensure that the mix is sustainable? Yeah. This is a document trail and not people walking all the way down to where the tree was cut originally. That is not the way it works. It's document trail. As said, it's not just about sustainable forestry, it's also about social compliance, environmental compliance. Again, permits, who is involved? And then, do I need to do this for every country in a similar way, or is there high risk, medium risk, and low risk? In fact, there is. There was already in the EU timber regulation, there were even countries that had a vlecht status, which is an agreement between the countries in the EU with respect to sustainable forest, which means that a country with vlecht status, you didn't need to do due diligence because the country itself has a due diligence system for taking care of that wood processed in that country is always within a sustainable format, basically. There will be high-risk countries. There will even be regions within countries that could be high risk. So it makes sense. It's not forbidden to buy from high-risk countries, but if the countries will be listed as high risk, you need to do more due diligence efforts. So you cannot have one sauce to cover everything. You would, fight your battles. So high-risk countries probably mean additional checks and balances, and maybe do an audit by a third party, or maybe do sometimes ask a complete document trail into the supply chain. And that will take time, but that is the cost of doing business in this world. So you can already see that this is much more than just a test report of electrical safety. This has to do with data. It's not SKU based, it's batch based, because you need to have a number per import. That doesn't mean that the data cannot be the same again and again and again, but you need to ensure that you monitor if the data is the same again and again and again. And you still need to submit. So that is work. Data, permits belong to who? To companies. What license do they have? Do they really have a license, or is it just a fake company? You can make a fake certificate. If you want to cut trees illegally, you definitely can make fake permits. Yeah. Who is involved? Social compliance. You're not going to go there yourself. They will either be Amfori or SA 8000, or if you are a furniture company and you are only dealing with this kind of things, you probably have your own auditors doing checks as well. Ditto for environmental compliance. And if you want to be sure that things are covered by all these audited supply trails, then you need to have traceability. So if you see that there is no traceability, what use is it to know that everybody is great, but that you cannot pinpoint products back to that part of the supply chain? So traceability is definitely a relevant part of this deal. Much more complex than EU timber regulation. High-risk countries, more stringent checks and balances will require additional documentation and will require deeper investigations. That makes also sense.
唔係因為佢可以到條其實嚟講要做啲咩咁嘅細我尤其是加重啊嘛。
Sorry, can you mute and not talk to me? Last but not least, you would not be the only one asking questions and putting pressure on the supply chain. The food sector will also deal with things. So there's a lot of pressure from everybody. And what we will expect to see is that from the other end, these industries will get themselves certified. So somewhere, I wouldn't say halfway, but they will grow into a certified situation, which is the only way for them to deal with this. What is the current status? Well, November 14, we had a discussion about this in the parliament. There was a lot of discussion already. We were not ready, and what can we do? December 30 December this year need to be done. How can it be? So what happens is they voted. The EU Parliament voted for a delay for 1 year till December 30. And SMEs till June 26. Well, for SMEs that's nice, but doesn't really help that half year extra if you supply large companies, because the large companies anyway will ask you similar questions as that you should have to ask as well. And they propose to add a no risk classification to countries as well, which probably will lower even the due diligence effort. That's an interesting interesting case. So let me look into that. I write, would it be delayed? Or will it be delayed? Well, we expect that it will be delayed, but it is not officially delayed. And the reason, therefore, is the EU Parliament voted for a proposal that they amended themselves, especially the adding of the non-risk category. They also have a nuance on the role of traders, which is not so relevant for everybody. What happens in that case? Well, there is something in Brussels. They have figured this out. This could happen. There's a committee for interinstitutional negotiations. It's like a small board within Brussels that now will say to the EU Commission and the EU Council and the EU Parliament, you need to get aligned on the amended proposal and agree that this indeed, therefore, this vote was okay. So we expect that the EU Commission and the EU Council will agree with the fact that the EU Parliament amended this proposal in this way, and that the new proposal therefore could be seen as being voted on positively and therefore can be published. Because if it's not published, it's not binding. So they need to do it before December 30, 2024, preferably. Yeah. Because the original date was December 30, 2024 of the old proposal. We expected this happened, but formally, therefore, I write, would be delayed, not will be delayed. So this proves, again, all these changes, all these things that are happen, sometimes last minute, you need to stay on top of things. Do yourself a favor and subscribe to our newsletters. Follow Project BME on LinkedIn. But most important, and I recommend that you do it ASAP. We have a Project B app, and get it on your smartphone in iOS or Android. So you have the last important stuff in your pocket. We are not going to spam you with all kind of nonsense. I hate those things, but you need to stay on top of things. So just let's go back to the risk levels for countries. High, normal, and low risk was what we had, and they proposed now to amend the vote and add a no risk. And that means that you have, for no risk, probably almost no due diligence efforts into the supply chain. Perhaps you will have to have all kind of social certificates on entities involved in the supply chain, but the sustainability of the product itself should not be at risk, not be questioned. I think the no risk is definitely very valuable for people in the food industry. Yeah. Otherwise, you have to have traceability of meat, which goes back to cows, which goes back to calves, born where and fed by what kind of food coming from what supply chain, and is there soy in there, and is the soy coming from where, etc., etc. So it's more like that part of the industry that really will benefit from this. Don't forget, within countries, you still can have high risks. So you could have a low risk country with a high risk region. It's for the EU to come up with all kind of, how to say, benchmarks on that, you know. Let me bring you briefly into, somebody asked, what will happen if the proposal will not be published before December 30? Well, it will happen. But if not, if they vote on January 6th, then between January 1st and January 6th, we have the current proposal, and then we will have the new proposal. That will be interesting. I want to take you a little bit to some questions that I made. And if you could scan the code with your smartphone, it's anonymous. I will take you along some of the myths around the EUDR that are out there, and we think that it's good to have a look at that together with you. Remember that these sessions are not to go into the nitty-gritty of legislation and to the dots and I's. It's on a little bit higher level to give you an understanding what is it about, because often you need to explain to your colleagues slash management that this is not a problem, but this is reality, and that you need to deal with it. And like with many other legislations, this is not about dots and I's in a standard. This is a bit, do we know with who we are doing our work with? There's a reason why you outsource production. To whom do we outsource production? Do we have a copy of business licenses? Do we know where we wire the money to? Do we have certificates that we can link to these entities? Are they doing due diligence to the next one? How often do they check? You cannot go tree hugging. You need to do supply chain due diligence or document trail. Okay, you can still look up menti.com and use the code for next slides. So let me see if this works. How are you today? You can type in some words on this. How are you today? Maybe after you have listened half an hour to Caspar. Cold, yeah, it's cold weather in the Netherlands. Could even be snowing. That sounds still positive after learning more about EUDR. That's good. Good to get energized. So I have a few statements and then I will debunk them with you. There's many people that say this EUDR will actually be disruptive for global supply chains. To give you some context, and before you maybe answer this, maybe you want to change your answer, is the EU is not alone in the EUDR. There is a bipartisan, which means both the Democrats and the Republicans have agreed, similar law in the United States. The Forestry Act is already active in the United States for quite a long time, like the EU timber regulation, and it's moving. It's being upgraded every 1 or 2 years with the new aspects, and it's moving in a similar way as that the EUDR is moving. So it's not just the European Union posting this, okay? But many of you say this will cause upheaval in global supply chain. Even though we have EU timber regulation for 10 years. The reality is actually that the majority of the agricultural production will be considered deforestation-free under the regulation. So it's not so much that it is a doubt, but it needs to be, how to say, independently established. But the expectation is that actually the majority of agricultural production, remember, this is not just about non-food, also food, will be considered deforestation-free. So the main aspects are not on deforestation-free. The main aspects are around working conditions. Yeah? High-risk classification countries does not mean that shipments will be banned. Yeah? But you just need to do more due diligence effort. It's a risk-based approach. If you have suppliers that are new, or you have a supplier that you have dealt with for 10 years and their documents always are proved to be correct, who are you going to pay attention to? Reality is not a problem. The reality is you probably will have not a lot of more time, people, resources. So you need to be smart. You need to Give credits to those that deserve to have credits because they have a standing relation, and look into new companies that you doubt or have not proven that they are a worthy supplier to you. So risk-based is in generally a good approach. It's better to focus than to give everybody a little bit of attention. Well, we all need a little bit of attention, but you know what I mean. There's still a number of questions in the Q&A. That's great. I'll come to a FAQ later as well. Means a mountain of paperwork. Well, if I would be importer of coffee or cacao, palm oil, I probably would say so. But you already need a lot of paperwork for those documents. I think for non-food, the real trouble is the move from SKU to batch-based. So it's not so much the increase of the information. There is an increase of information, but if we once we set the process that we just not need this certificate, we also need that document and that document. Once we have said that, and you use an interface like Product to share information in the supply chain, that's not the work. But to go from a SKU-based rhythm to a batch-based rhythm, that's work. Yeah. And that is a reality. In fact, for many aspects, even if you want to look at carbon footprint of products, you probably see many legislations moving to a batch-based system. So you need to question yourself, and many of our customers already do that, and we are cooperating with that. Do I need to organize documents for my supply chain, or do I want to have products with organized documents from my supply chain? And we see customers moving from collaborating with their supply chain via Product from an invite to collect documents to an invite, I get a complete file. The file request is a transition of work down to the supply chain. Remember, there was a reason why you outsourced production. There's specialism in the supply chain for certain products. There's cheaper labor, and there's more knowledge about the actual product. Yeah, they should know which materials they use and from which vendors. So I would say paperwork, yes. Mountain, yeah. But the question is the mountain on your desk there because you didn't make the right decisions to activate the supply chain? A mature supply chain should have information. I agree. And the goal would be to move from non-fo to info. Yeah, non-formal information systems, email, post-its, cloud storage, Dropbox, Google. It's not efficient. You need to repeat again. Yeah. Will it lead to supply chain bottlenecks and therefore an increase of price? Well, I guess everybody will say yes, and any new measurements will increase price. So if we put some questions to our supply chain, yeah, can do, price will go up. I'm interested to see. Many people say no. Maybe they have read the FAQ already. It's a question. If a country as China does not offer geolocation data due to their protection of land data, do we need to cut out the supplier? Who says China doesn't offer geolocation data? You know, it's not like military. There are, in China there's also permits to cut forest, you know, and it's not that you need to actually launch military investigation. It's about permits. I think for countries like China, getting property certified and supply chain partner certified is the way to answer these kind of questions. Because if part of your supply chain is a certified supply chain, questions are already answered. Yeah. And actually the benefits could outweigh the cost because it will be more efficient. You know, if you are dragging on part of the supply chain that actually doesn't have anything, or you are putting time and effort in organizing information that is actually non-fo, that's a waste of time. Best practices would be moving into an efficient supply chain with reliable data or data that comes from a certified source, which limits your due diligence effort. And it's like with food contact material. If a factory has good manufacturing practice, which is actually mandatory, meaning that they know what is in the product, and when they buy raw materials, these raw materials are already food grade. This saves tons of questions at the end and tons of testing at the end, because rubbish in, more potentially rubbish out, quality in, quality out. Don't forget, there's a lot of other aspects in the supply chain that are causing costs that you don't see. Yeah? Yes, there will be people increasing prices because they actually have there will people be reducing prices because otherwise they cannot have access to the market. But so be aware of cowboys trying to say, yeah, we can do it, and this is our best price. There will be people that have non-sustainable supply chain, and I just wanted to comment that China has an espionage law that forbids companies from sharing Chinese geolocations. Well, that's nice, because I know from many companies actually where their address is, which is also a geolocation. Yes, there are espionage laws, but this is not about espionage. The Chinese government really realizes what it means to deal with it, and they will come up with probably a certified statement or an internal company law that facilitates it. Don't go into that direction. They have everything to lose. And actually, China is importing wood. So it's not about the wood coming from China. They are importing tons and tons of wood from Africa and from South America. And it's about that wood. So it's not even geolocation in China. It's geolocation outside China. Yeah. So the cost of compliance for companies will be lower than the benefits. So that's good. We are just an SME. We cannot deal with this. Well, I think that has some truth in there, because many SMEs actually have never considered cost of compliance as part of the cost of doing business. If you think that with a limited number of people you can have a very, very broad scope of products, I would reconsider that. Focus is probably a good way out. Having said that, many of your large retail customers, their focus is tremendously broad. The question is, do they have the expertise that you have on certain products to deal with it? This is just one layer of legislation. Besides EUDR, there's many other aspects. Think about repairability of products, energy consumption of products, all kinds of technologies, features in products, even AI. A retailer has a very broad scope of products. Can they still deal with this, or will they need to rely on expertise of partners? I'm happy that more of you say no. I'm happy. Good way. I agree. There's a little bit more time to prepare. I think what is the reality is there's 10 years of EU timber regulation that we had behind us. Having said that, it might be wise to look at your scope and think, do we really need to have certain products in our program if actually the business case doesn't justify that we continue with that? That's a sane decision anyway. Do you think that EUDR therefore will impact what you offer to the market? Mixed. It's good in the mix. There are companies that have a focus on certain products or product types. They probably will say, no, it doesn't change. This is what we do. This is where we're good at. I think those that are having less focus, we'll say probably perhaps some, which makes sense, you know. Cost of compliance becoming part of business decisions. That's what we see. And you know, it's a very valid reason to change a little bit of your business focus. Will it impact the way you select or look at your current supply chain partners? I think here the answer will definitely be more in perhaps some and absolutely. Somebody has a question. I'm sourcing a wooden box from Poland. What kind of checks do I need to make, or is the manufacturer responsibility for this? Yeah, EUDR is not about products in Europe. Yeah. The one that makes that wooden box from Poland, that is the one that needs to do with. So the SMEs will get 6 months extra preparing time. Yeah, and their due diligence efforts are a little bit limited, a little bit more limited than the large companies. It's a little bit risk-based, but it's still. You see, this is interesting. When we do our risk assessment trainings or one-day pressure cooker sessions, I often say to the people that we are collaborating with on that day, during this day, write down the names of your suppliers that you think will absolutely not be capable of dealing with all of this. There's no scarcity of companies that want to work with you in the new way. You know, there are absolutely people whose livelihood depend on certain type of products, and they will migrate with you into the new reality. Good. Last but not least, if I say EUDR, you say? Quiet. Nobody says anything. Annoyed. Yeah. I think utopia is interesting. Yeah, Pooh would probably be there. You know, if you have never considered these aspects when you started to do business in a product segment with certain suppliers, then perhaps some of these emotions come from that. If you look at this legislation and many other of the legislation, and I've said it in the last 2 years in Compliance Tuesday, read between the lines. You know, the voluntarily part of many of what we have already is gone, and you need to take the compliance part of your business very, very serious. Otherwise, you have no access to the market, which means that those that do take these things on serious will have benefit of the doubt and will have access to market. Yeah. A joke for Trump. Good. All right. I'll keep this this slide open, the Mentimeter, for the next few hours. You can still add your questions here after the session. I will combine that. So I'll leave this one open, even though I'm not sharing this one anymore, and then I'll come have a look at that because let's quickly go back to the keynote. So FAQ, what about packaging materials? Well, packaging materials as part of consumer goods is not in the scope of the EUDR. If you import packaging material as a product that I as an end consumer would buy to package presents, then that is not packaging material as part of consumer goods. Yeah. So packaging material as part of consumer goods is not in the scope of EUDR. What if we use wood for packaging materials? It's also not part of the scope of EUDR if it's there to support or protect or carry another product, even if the product supported by the packaging is in the scope. Yeah. This one is very relevant. Surely there must be a threshold on quantities of products or value, and under that EUDR is not applicable. It's not. Timber regulation didn't have that, in fact. Okay, but EUDR has not, which means that it would also apply to shipments and sampling. Yeah, and one question is, what if I sell paper for packaging filling? That is, if you sell that as a product here, it's not packaging of a consumer product by itself, so it's actually a product, and then you need to apply with that. I will answer the Q&A questions anyway separately and share that with the slide deck. So don't worry if I don't answer your question for that. But this is interesting. If you if you have single shipments, then you also need to do that. And this definitely will be disrupted, sampling. Yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't vote on that. Having said that, the response of non-food industry against this kind of legislation in general is non-existent. There are lawyers involved in dealing with this, but they're just focusing on the structure of what happens if you don't comply, what would be the fine for the management, what would be the fine for the company. They are far, far away from practical implications. I would have suggested that sample orders would be left out of this, but nope. Yeah. Somebody says packaging material as part of the sales item is in scope. For example, a mouse box of paper with poison in there to attract a mouse. Yeah, because that is not consumer packaging, Michael. This is logic. Yeah. Is it applicable for shipping cartons? No, also not. No. Okay, what about X? There's X in codes. What does it mean actually? Well, if you see in I will share the legislation with you. And the annex, there's 5-6 pages of HS codes, because it also have the food area in there and almost all the wood products. But sometimes you see X number. What does it X mean? The X stands for extract, and you need to understand what it means. For example, HS code ending on 9041. This talks about seeds in general. But of course, not all seeds are covered under EUDR, but the wooden seeds are. Or X4011, new pneumatic tires. But these tires are made of a mix of natural and synthetic rubber. Obviously, synthetic rubber doesn't come from trees and is not in the scope, but natural rubber comes from rubber trees. And you don't want to cut a forest down and make money. So cut it down illegally and make money on rubber trees. So the EUDR will apply to the natural rubber part of this pneumatic tire. So X is extract. Yeah. So if you import cardboard packaging for refurbishing consumer products, the packaging will run under an edge code affected by the EUDR. Correct. Because that packaging is not part of a consumer product. It's a product by itself. I'm not going over all the FAQs. There's 53 pages of FAQs. Really? Yeah. But don't think that they all apply to you. Again, there are FAQs for those that import palm oil or products with palm oil, but especially just palm oil, or just leather, or just meat, or just coffee, or just... so don't think you need to write or read 53 pages. There's aspects in the 53 that are very relevant for you. And those were a few that I picked out, I thought were very relevant for you in this case. Okay. Almost going to the end. What can you do? What should you do? I would say start with mapping your supply chain and the next level of partners and ask them to do the same. And there should be, as in a good supply chain, there should be alternative suppliers into the supply chain. If you have an electrical product and they have the one that supplies you with the power bank has just one charger and one charger vendor for this, then that is not secure. They should have alternatives, and these alternatives should actually be of a kind of a status. This is the same here. What do I know from my supply chain partner? And if this is trader, I would void him in my supply chain in this due diligence, because he is not doing anything with the product otherwise than organizing shipment and organizing things. He's not actually a manufacturer in the supply chain. So he's relevant and should participate. So the first one in the real manufacturing supply chain, and the next one should be there. And there should be contracts. You have a contract with them, and they should oppose similar audits and systems on their vendors, and they should audit their vendors. How many of you have asked their first tier, when was the last time they have audited their critical vendors? And one of the questions to defenders should be, what is the last time you audited your vendors? I bet you the answer is no, probably none of you have done that. So you cannot do it by yourself, but you need to start asking questions and have an opinion about answers that you don't get. Where are they? High, medium, low risk countries. That is good to map out. And I would also say, from a business point of view, how would you rate those suppliers? Would you rate them as high, medium, or low? That is not so relevant for the due diligence effort declaration, but it's for your business effort. How good do you think are they when you start to ask them questions? Because you need to map your effort. Yeah. And of course, I would say, are they covered by relevant third-party programs? FSC, PFAC, that's about timber. I would actually say here as well, Amfori, SA 8000, and the other audit programs. Yeah, because for most of us, if not all, we don't own a forest and we don't own the wood mills. We are buying products and we want to have a certified supply chain. One of the aspects I would like to highlight, and I don't want to discredit FSC, but many believe that FSC is the way to go as the way out of this. I would say yes, it's not a bad choice. PFAC, FSC, certified partners, absolutely, it's the way out. Just this week, I got an email, 30 years of FSC, and I applaud them for that. Hell of a job. Plus 160 million hectares of forest are FSC forest. I would say that is impressive. But now comes the reality check for you. There's 1,150 members. How many suppliers do you think you have, or we all have together with everybody in the supply chain? The reality is the vast majority of the supply chain is not certified at all. Yeah. So it's nice to have a forest that is FSC certified, but if everybody next in line isn't, then you still have a lot of work. And FSC obviously is reinventing themselves, creating kind of a mix between FSC and Amfori for certain parts of their supply chain, which makes perfect sense. Yeah. So I'm a fan, and I am also a fan of PFAC. I like these certification programs. I think it's the way out for retail and trade, for both sides of the supply chain. If I would be somewhere in the supply chain, I would use certification status to keep all that ask questions away from me and saying, listen, it's all in the scope of what we are looking for, and you don't need to question the data. Here's the data. Yeah. So it's very relevant, but 1,150 members, I would say, only. Yeah. Even this might be 2 times as many as a few years ago, but this need to be 1,000 times more. Yeah. There's 130 million small businesses in many databases already. Numbers are far bigger. Project P has 30,000 users. Okay, so work to be done. Work to be done. So FSA is the way to go. I would say there will be a scarcity of certified materials, which will be the same with batteries. Okay? Keep calm and stay compliant. That's the way forward. But start mapping first. Still some questions in the Q&A if you want. I will happy to to answer these, and you can still put questions in the Mentimeter sessions. They're still open. I'll keep it open for the next hour or so, and then close that, and then I'll look at all the questions and put them into the annex of the slide deck, and then have this all available for you in the next few days. All right. Any more questions? Do you want to comment? I'm sourcing with the books. Can we share the slides, please? Yes, of course. What are obligations concerning EUDR as candle manufacturer using palm oil derivatives and fractions? Exactly. The due diligence for palm oil is same as due diligence for wood or the natural rubber in the rubber tires. Yeah, so you buy candles. Look at the candles in the HS codes on them. I think in general, large companies that have due diligence duties under EU CSRD or EU CSDDD, all kind of due diligence requirements. Actually, the handbook for due diligence is basically written here. Even if the HS code is not in your scope, but if you know that certain raw materials are used in your products and you are a large company and you need to do due diligence, do you really think it's smart to make another due diligence system completely different from what EUDR is actually writing down? No, I would just use that and then look further down in my supply chain and follow the same approach. This is your roadmap. Yeah. How do we map paper and pulp from each source? Can be many forest locations, declarations in excess. That's correct. That is the same with MDF. Yeah. So waste products and waste packaging. There is actually an FAQ on that. Either they all come from a supply chain that is guaranteed using only sustainable, so waste from sustainable sources, then the final mix is also sustainable. But if you have, for example, a mix of recycled and virgin material, even if the recycled material you cannot trace, but the virgin material you can trace, definitely an effort. But I would say the ones that actually mix those two products, recycled paper and new paper, and want to make paper, sell paper, it's their duty to be part of a world that asks questions. You know, they should know that they can only sell their product with this information to European suppliers and actually American companies. Brit, are there more benefits in being PEFC certified than FSC certified? No, I would not dare to say one is better than the other one. I think supply chain certification, same with an AMFORI or SA 8000 or similar on social compliance aspect, makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's like crowd certification basically. Yeah, it's many people asking entities to be certified, and many people share the cost of companies becoming certified. So I wouldn't say one is better than the other, but looking for certificates is the best way. All right, no more questions here. Then we have done it exactly in 1 hour. Thank you very, very much for being here. Give us a day and a half approximately. I think Thursday you will have the slide deck available. We will go over the answers. If you still haven't had time to put an answer there and you come up with an answer after 1 hour, just send me a mail. You have my data, or look me up on LinkedIn and put me in a DM, and I'm happy to process those questions to Q&A. We probably have a lot of answers in Product IPedia as well. After this session, have a cup of coffee, glass of water, and do yourself a favor, install the Product IP app. It would be great. Thank you very much, and see you soon again on another Compliance Tuesday. Bye-bye.